Okay, so we do seem to have a handful of people online as well as a few people who are physically in attendance. So first and foremost, thank you all for joining us here in Perth, Western Australia, regarded as the most isolated capital city in the world. Yeah, we're so isolated that the only way we can get people to come and meet us is if we do it online. Otherwise, we can't get people to come and join us. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Jordan. I'll be the moderator for this evening. Now, we've got quite a diverse panel today. We've got someone from academia. We've got two youth members from two different political parties. And we will have Ambiga, who represents, I suppose, the civil society movement in Malaysia here. So since we have only three people at this point of time, we might kick off with the three of you all. But just prior to that, just a few housekeeping rules. Can everybody ensure that they are on mute? And we will be hearing from the speakers one after the other, and we will take questions at the end of the presentations by all the speakers. We are prioritizing written questions, so those who are online, please send your questions via the chat channel. And those who are present, if you have any questions, we have some paper. Just write down your questions and pass it to us, and we will present it to the panel. So, okay, so on that score, maybe it's time to get started. Let's start with academia. So, Professor James Chin. Professor James is a Professor of Asian Studies at the University of Tasmania. He's also the Director of the Asian Institute over there. Professor James is Malaysian. He is rated as an expert on Southeast Asian governance issues, particularly in Malaysia. He used to be with the University of the Malaysian branch of the University of Monash back in Malaysia. And if those of you all who are familiar with the Bersih movement in the early days, and if you know the Bersih steering committee members, you might recall Wong Chin Wat. If I'm not mistaken, Professor James Chin Wat used to work with you. I think you were his boss at one point of time. So Professor James is rated very much an expert in Malaysian issues. He's written quite a few papers. So we can safely say that Professor James is someone who knows what he's talking about. So on that note, maybe Professor will start with you, if you can start your presentation.
Sure. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the organizers for their kind invitation for me to take part in this afternoon's discussion. Before we start, just a very minor correction. I step out from my role as the director of the Asian Institute. I finished my term there, so I'm now back to full-time teaching and research as Professor of Asian Studies.
Okay, noted.
So let me start by, I'm not very used to Teams, but I'll try my very best. I just need to move on to the slides. Okay, can you guys see the slides now?
Yes, we've got the first slide on.
Okay. So basically, I think this afternoon is the topic given to us is why bother. So I think it's fairly obvious why we're bothering. I think we started by saying that we are all Malaysians. It really doesn't matter where we come from, whether we're living in Perlis or living in Johor or living in Sabah, Sarawak, or even those of us are living overseas. I think it's quite clear that there are basically four main reasons why we should really care about the upcoming general elections. The first one is really the choice is very, very clear for Malaysians. It is quite clear that there's only two major contestants in the general election that's coming up. On the one side, it's very clear it will be the Barisan Nasional. Even though officially they are in coalition with Perikatan Nasional, coming up to GE15, that coalition will not exist. It will basically be Barisan Nasional versus the opposition. And it is very clear that if Barisan wins, we are going back in time. So there'll be a time travel element for Malaysia because they're going to drag Malaysia back to pre-2018. And the last 4 years will just be, just be memories. They're going to bring back exactly the same sort of policies that we see for the first 60 years of Malaysia. So it'll be very much the sort of Barisan Nasional type government that has ruled Malaysia from early 70s up to 2018. The other side of the coin, of course, is that people talk about giving the opposition a chance to carry out the reforms. That was interrupted by 2020 when the Pakatan Harapan government imploded. So really the choice is clear. One is really going back in time. The other is sort of moving back to indirectly to 2020 and giving Pakatan Harapan a chance to finish out all the reforms that they were not able to do because the government fell apart in 2020. I think the second point is also, I think, quite important, and it's something I mentioned, that we are all being Malaysians, and if you care about Malaysia and the future of Malaysia, you really have to get yourself involved. By not getting involved and not voting, this is really about giving up your voice. I always tell people, if you don't want to get involved in a political process, then maybe you shouldn't complain too much. You can complain a little bit, but maybe you shouldn't complain too much. The third one, of course, is that Malaysian politicians, like politicians everywhere, they react to voters. We always tell people that your vote really doesn't count. While it is true, your vote doesn't count in the really big seats in terms of winning and losing, because sometimes the margins are very big. But that doesn't mean that your vote doesn't count. It doesn't mean that the politicians don't read, the way you vote. So even even if that seat is won by a big majority, the politicians still look at the voting outcome. So basically, what I'm saying is that elections have consequences. So I think that's another key reasons why people should bother about GE15. And of course, to summarize out, voting is really about an opportunity for change. If you want to change something, you really have to vote. Because in the Malaysian system, which we inherited from the British, the way to change the future of the country politically is through the vote. There is no other way. Finally, what are the key reforms? As I mentioned, it's very important to vote the right way. So what are the key reforms that the country will have to do very quickly after GE15? This is sort of my personal wish list, but I suspect my personal wish list is actually quite similar to what a lot of people in Malaysia are thinking. The first one is, I think the most important one is actually to limit the term of the Prime Minister of Malaysia. I think if we can stick or constitutionally build in safeguards where the Prime Minister of Malaysia can only serve for a maximum of 10 years, I think that will be a game changer. The reason I say this is because the big problem we face in Malaysia is political patronage. And the way it was in the Malaysian system is that all political patronage comes out from the office of the Prime Minister. So really, if you can limit the Prime Minister to 2 terms, I think you will solve a lot of the problems. Not all the problems, but a lot of the big problems will be resolved. As a bonus, if you can limit the term of the Menteri Besar or the Chief Minister to 2 terms, that will even be better. The second one which I would like to see is, of course, the position of the AG. It has become highly politicized from the time of Mahathir. I think there is general consensus in the legal community that perhaps that role should be split into 2 separate roles. So in other words, I would like to see less politics in the AG's position. The third one I would like to see is that I would like to see clear rules in terms of passing the vote of no confidence, making it a lot easier. Right now, too much power is given to the speaker. He or she can decide unilaterally whether a vote of no confidence can proceed, which I don't think is the right thing to do. The fourth one is party hopping. There's a discussion about whether they'll be passed before or after GE15. My point is that we have to do something about party hopping. Of course, there are various options on the table. I will not go into details because it's a separate discussion. But whatever it is, I would like to see a law dealing with party hopping. If it is not done now, it must be done fairly soon after GE15. Item number 5, I think Sabah and Sarawak decentralization issue, I think is crucially important. If you want to promote democracy at a local level, you have to push more power downwards. And this relates to the point I made earlier, which is limiting the terms of the Prime Minister and the Menteri Besar and the Chief Ministers. The other 6, 7, and 8, I think those are doable issues, but that probably will have to wait a big while after GE15. One is GLCs, especially Petronas, will have to be more accountable to the government. 7 and 8, I think you need reforms in the security services. I think the hearing on by Suhakam on the enforced disappearance, I think that bother a lot of people. Reforms in the civil service, I don't have to tell you anything. I think any Malaysians who has had any dealings with the civil service will tell you that major reforms are needed. But of course, these are some of the key items for me. But there are many others. But I think if we vote in the right group of people in GE15, I'm hopeful that out of the 8 that I put up here, maybe they will be able to do 4 or 5 in the first half of first half after the GE. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Professor. We have had quite a few people join us online while Professor James was presenting. We had announced at the beginning that we will take questions once we have heard from all the presenters. So we'll move on to the next 2 presenters. But in the meantime, those online, if you have any questions, please post your questions via the chat channel. And those who are present here, we have distributed some pads. Just write down any questions you have and pass it up front, and then we will present them to the panel. So now we will move on to the next speakers. Our other panel members at the moment are actually from the youth side of politics and will hopefully offer us a fresh perspective of the situation on the ground in Malaysia. If there's indeed hope for Malaysia, then they would probably represent the new hope. So first, let me introduce Kelvin Yii, who is the Member of Parliament for Bandar Kuching and Chief of the Youth Wing of the DAP. I think they refer to themselves as DAPSY. Kelvin has served on various select committees in Parliament, so despite his youth, it does come with some practical insight. Joining Kelvin to provide us with I suppose, a youth insight is Amira Aisya Abdul Aziz, member of the Johor State Assembly, and also the co-founder and Secretary General of the Malaysian United Democratic Alliance, which we all know as MUDA. As you can tell by the name, MUDA is a party for the young. And Amira, I believe she's only 27 years old, so probably the youngest member of the Johor State Assembly and the only one from MUDA to get elected. So she's the sole serving member on the Assembly from MUDA. So these two should be able to provide us with, I suppose, an analysis of how they see the future of Malaysia, because they basically represent Malaysia's new hope. So we'll start with Kelvin. Kelvin, would you like to take it off?
Sure, thank you so much. Good afternoon from here in Malaysia, and thank you so much for having me. It's so good to be here to share some of my thoughts as well with a very distinguished panel. Of course, Professor James and my fellow colleague, Saudari Amira. It's so good to see young people taking a role and taking a stand and a platform in terms of building our nation and also standing in the front lines. It's not easy. I can remember the first time I was elected as a member of parliament, and the first time I stood up to debate, I could hear jeers from the opposite bench saying that, oh, MUDA, young people, what do you know? Why don't you study first before you come and stand up and talk? So that is the environment and atmosphere that we are facing. But the good thing is more and more Malaysians are starting to see the importance of young people being involved in the whole democratic process and rebuilding our nations. And that is why, and of course, I represent the DAP, and my party, in my view, has been very, very open. I like to say this, we are the original MUDA party because since the beginning, we have been giving the young people opportunities even to be in all different layers and of leadership in every society. So I think let me jump into what I feel I want to share. Of course, the big question everybody's asking me, even on the ground, say, Kelvin, is there even hope? Is there even a reason for me to come out to vote, looking at how things are going, and due to the disappointment, disillusions with, of course, the Pakatan Harapan government at that time, the things that we did not do or we did do and everything. So I understand such frustrations. I understand such disillusionment. I myself share some of it as well. But the reality is this. I mean, if we do not come out, if we give up our right or give up our voice to vote, others will make that decision for us. And before us now is two very obvious choices, as Professor James just now mentioned. It's actually a government that is authoritarian, a government that is not inclusive, a government that feeds on the interest of a particular groups of people only, versus another coalition. Again, we are not a perfect coalition that represents a more inclusive, progressive, more consensus building, and of course, need-based kind of a coalition. So I said, we are not a perfect coalition. We were not a perfect government. We acknowledge there were missteps, there were issues that were mishandled that could have been handled better. But again, I like to say this, that we were supposed to have 5 years, but then it was disrupted, and a lot of disillusionment, a lot of disappointment happened because we were judged on we were judged on a 5-year report card in 2 years. So imagine if you are sitting for a test and it's a 3-hour test, and then suddenly the examiner stops you. Okay, it's 1 hour time. Stop. I want to mark your paper now, right now. So we had 3 hours to finish the test, but it was only 1 hour, and we were marked at that period of time. So again, it was given maybe an unfair comparison or unfair expectation on us to perform. But even I mean, I'm not here to make excuses, but I'm here to hopefully inspire and to encourage you all, even in that short period of 2 years. While, as I said, I really acknowledge there were shortcomings, but there were a lot of progressive and positive moves that was made because of a change of government. I mean, this is not just me blowing our own trumpet, but this is internationally recognized progress. We look at even the International Media Freedom Index. We increased the highest. We went up to, we shot the greatest improvement in 2020 under, of course, the PH government, leaping 22 spots to 101 at that time, and it was the biggest jump globally. But just in 1 year, when Sheraton Move happened, we collapsed, we fell, we dropped to 119 in the ranking of 180. Transparency Index, Corruption Practice Index, we went up 10 spots in the first year itself when we did. And we know since Sheraton, things have been going downhill. Democratic Index, inflation was the lowest during our time. In Malaysia right now, prices of goods are going up. Oil now, the big tong is 50 ringgit, used to be 19, 20 ringgit during our time. And this was 2019, 2 years ago. Professor James will agree with me. If you come back to Malaysia right now, durian is more expensive and is projected to increase 100%. And all these things are happening. Of course, I know there are multiple factors, international factors, supply chain factors, and everything. But again, it comes down to whether the government have policies in place to manage this and to ensure inflation is not too much that will burden the people, because we know right now, especially post-pandemic, there are issues that we cannot control. So all this and many more were done because the people gave us trust. People came out in droves to vote, and because of that, we managed to change the government for the first time in our history. Of course, the Sheraton Move happened. The Sheraton Move disappointed us. I was very, very disappointed. All the hard work, a lot of my colleagues that were in government, yes, they received a lot of criticism, but many of them worked from morning till night to make sure that we could at least have to put in frameworks and foundations so that hopefully we will see in maybe 4 or 5 years to 10 years time. But yet before the fruits will come to fruition, things collapse. But then even with Sheraton Move, there were, I think, positives that come out of it. Number one, it made politics to a certain extent dynamic, that there is no one big coalition that could actually have an authoritative control over Malaysia. And because of that, to a certain extent, instability, there was a vacuum and opportunity for the reform agenda to be the main conversations. And that is where the birth of the MOU between PH and also the current government. Because of that instability, we can push, hey, you want a stable government, and we needed a stable government. We knew we didn't have the numbers. As much as the opposition leaders claim at that time that we knew that there was no majority. So our agenda was, how can we have a stable government so that the country can recover and the people can get the need they really need, especially during the endemic and post-endemic. And that's where the MOU came in, and then we pushed many reforms, 45 billion injection, anti-hopping law, the constitutional amendments for Sabah and Sarawak, even the Prime Minister terms limit to 2 years is part of the MOU, and we are looking at that happening in the next session where the anti-hopping law is supposedly passed. So you see that as even though bad things happen, there are always pockets of opportunity and vacuums of opportunities for us to push for reform agenda. And the fact of the matter, a lot of people say, Kelvin, PH will not win the next election. But imagine if droves and droves of people still come up and support. There may be no clear winner in the next election. When there is no clear winner in the next election, guess what will be the main bargaining chip, at least from our side? We want reforms. We want this agenda to make sure it's the mainstream. It's in the top of the line before you can look at us being part of your partners to run the country. So whether we win, of course, best case scenario, we want to win the government. But there is another scenario where possibly there is no coalition that wins the majority. So if we are strong, if we have the numbers, you win enough seat to negotiate and have a demanding figure, you know what will be our main agenda when we demand. So again, comes back to this question. Why should we vote? I mean, for me, my big concern is this. We have seen authoritarianism creeping in most parts of the world. I mean, even Southeast Asia. The Philippines election should be a very good example of how crimes can be whitewashed and then authoritative leaders can come back in. Thailand, Myanmar. And the fact of the matter is Malaysia still has hope to be that democratic beacon in our region. The miracle of GE15 actually was achieved not because of an act of a single politician or any individual, but it was a whole cohesive network of Malaysians across borders who wanted to see a better Malaysia. In fact, the matter is, I was just sharing this morning with our grassroots members in Miri right now, is there really hope? Can we really see hope in these elections? I mean, let me give you an example. In the Johor state elections, yes, Barisan Nasional won a 2/3 majority. But the fact of the matter, 40% of the population did not vote in PRN Johor. Many said, oh, these people didn't vote because they were disillusioned with us. They didn't see hope. But you see, we have a chance now to stir up, to convince them, to encourage them, to give them spirit, and show that it is important for them to turn up, to vote, and to participate. Because authoritarianism, kleptocrats will win if we do not organize and we do not mobilize. The other for me spark of hope is the young people. This is, I believe, the young people are the game changers even in this election. Or they say in Johor we didn't see that, but again, right now if you look at a national, okay, I can give the Johor example. Some said that the young people did not vote for Pakatan in the Johor election, especially the Malays. But then if we see some of the statistics, many of them voted for Pakatan National. Okay, to me, I see that as an opportunity.
Because we can hear it clearly. Yeah.
The fact that young people, especially the Malays, they will.
Issues, Johnny. Do you got number?
Can you hear me?
That,
Okay, I will.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I said, for the fact that young Malays voted Perikatan Nasional, for me, it's an opportunity for us. The fact that they rejected voting for
I
UMNO,
will follow up.
they rejected voting for the corruption that UMNO is associated with, that they look for an alternative. If we, Pakatan Harapan, and even with MUDA, if we can, along this line, convince these Malay young voters that say, you know what, we are a better alternative, these people can swing back to us. This is an opportunity that we can actually have. So imagine this, 2013, 2018 elections, one of the big factors for the strong showing of the election, of the opposition that time, was because young people showed up in droves to help. Even the campaign for Balik Undi, I'm sure you guys are fully familiar. People collecting ballot boxes, bringing back from Australia, bringing back from the UK, from the US, or to Malaysia to vote. This was all empowered or even run at the backbone of young people. So do you know that the statistics that in 2018, the election, actually 67% of the unregistered voters at that time were from 21 to 30 years old of age, 21 to 30 years of age. So it shows that more than 30%. Imagine at that time, 2013, 2018, there was a huge mobilization of young people, but it's only 30% of those that has been registered. So now with automatic registration, now with only 18 to add in another 18 to 21 years, 20 years old kind of demographic, Imagine if we can mobilize them and we can tap into them, we can engage them, we can convince them, we can capture their hearts and minds and imaginations. There will be hope. So again, is there hope for Malaysia? Can PH be that hope? Do our leaders currently instill hope? But my appeal to you all, of course, there are some people in my view I feel should make way for younger leaders. But instead of looking at one leader itself, let's look at a collective leadership. Let's compare between the coalitions. Who has better collective leadership? Who has better potential? Who has a better pedigree and competence to run a country? And from that, I think we can make a clear choice. And I firmly believe that each and every one of us, our voice really matters. Let's stand up together. Let's not give up hope. We can restart Malaysia's democratization together. We can restart the reforms that we want. We do not want to just see hope only, then we persevere. But we need to keep persevering even in tough times. Then we can see hope together. So my last sharing and my last hope with you all is, wherever we may be, I think Prof. James has mentioned just now, Malaysia is our home, it's in our hearts. So let us together, come together and save our homeland. So thank you so much, and back to you.
You're mute.
Oh, done. We'll now hear this perspective from another youth member. Amira, will you like to share your thoughts on this and why you think there's still hope for Malaysia, and particularly from the standpoint of overseas Malaysians, why should we remain engaged? Take it away, Amira.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here, along with Professor James, YB Kelvin, and I hope, I am I guess the new kid on the block, but I hope, there's something here that I can share and hopefully something I can learn from this forum as well. Well, first and foremost, I think it's good for us to also look at the current state of politics in Malaysia, because I think right now, more than ever, the politics in Malaysia is in a situation that is very fluid. Anything can happen. I think YB Kelvin, who is a member of parliament, knows this best, that, in such short period of time, things can change. And obviously, these kind of things, I understand how it could be confusing for the people. Many times when I go down on the ground and speak to the people of my constituency, most of the times what they said to me was that they couldn't keep up with politics anymore. Even those who used to be very interested in politics, they couldn't keep up on who's in what side. In federal government, Barisan Nasional and Perikatan Nasional form government together, but suddenly in Johor, Perikatan Nasional is an opposition, and which coalition is, which party is in which coalition. I think all these things cause a lot of confusion for the general public, and this is one of the reasons why most of them feel disheartened and dispirited to join into the political or democratic process anymore. And looking at it, I think the cause of it all will again boil down to what happened during the Sheraton Move. But I think after the Sheraton Move, it causes two things. There are obviously a segment of people who became very disheartened with politics, who felt that whatever you do, regardless of who you vote for, your votes do not matter, because then these politicians will just simply jump ship according to whichever they like. But there are also a segment of group who felt like there is a need for more and more people to be involved in politics, so that we can change politics as we know it. We can create, policies that can govern the system of politics itself, and to govern the stability of politics in Malaysia. And I think for myself, for example, I come from that segment of people. MUDA was formed because we are a group of young people who believe that it's time for the young people to take charge or to take over the mantle of leadership in the country. We believe that there's something new that we need to bring forth to the table. We need to move away from the old ideals of what politics looks like, and bring in new, fresh ideas and disrupt politics as we know it. And I think out of the Sheraton Move, a lot of things, a lot of reforms are now something that people talk about in a more, the discourse is larger. A lot more people are involved in the discourse, and the general public now understand the need for reforms such as anti-party hopping law. They understand the need for reforms like Political Financing Act. They understand the need for reform, for example, like Prof. James mentioned just now, the need for us to put a term limit to the service of a prime minister, because it's dangerous for you to allow a single person who holds such a high position in the country to hold their term for so long and give that power for so long to them and cause many sort of destruction in terms of the institution of Malaysia. And I think all these things are the result of Sheraton Move that before these people might not be too involved or aware or wanting to talk about it, especially for the young people. So I think again, like my my colleague YB Kelvin mentioned just now, there is obviously a silver lining to what happened during the Sheraton Move. Not to say that it should happen again, but obviously something good did come out of it as well. But I think it is very important for us to look at the recent elections that we have, several recent elections that we have. For example, the recent Johor election. Although Johor is always being considered as a hotbed of politics in Malaysia, I mean, I myself am a Johorian, and we always feel that whatever happens in Johor could sort of like give us a look into what will happen in the future politics of Putrajaya. But looking at the recent Johor election, where only about 55% of people turn out, I think it's very important for us to look into, number one, the reason why people don't turn out. Obviously, a lot of people are saying that it's because of COVID-19. People are scared of the COVID-19. But more than that, is this feeling of this, they're feeling very disheartened to go out to vote. And obviously, as politicians, we can't just go on and say that, oh, this is the people's fault, they don't go out to vote, that's why we lose. I think the responsibility of a politician, which in any side, has to be to inspire people to go and vote. Because the people would only go out to vote if they believe that there's a chance for you to make things right for them. And if you look at, again, looking at the coming general election, right? Who should the people choose between the coalition of Barisan Nasional and the opposition coalition, which is currently a huge coalition? I'm always a proponent of the big tent that is currently being talked about, of course. And I think looking at it as well, we have to look at what Barisan Nasional has done to the country in the past over 60 years, and what has Pakatan Harapan managed to do in the short term of 22 months. After 60 more years of ruling the country, just now I went to a kampung in my kawasan, a kampung baru, it's called, and my kawasan is in town, in Johor Bahru. But even in Johor Bahru, there's this small kampung where the road is really bad. About 360 families live in that kampung, so it's quite a huge kampung. But the access to the kampung is very bad. Only you have to take a half an hour drive. There's an auntie who needs to tie her children to her body while she's taking her motorbike to send them to school, and these things are still happening. In town like Johor Bahru, and these things are happening more and more in states like Sabah, in Sarawak, looking at Kelantan, and all these things have happened under the watch of Barisan Nasional. And if you want to say that Pakatan Harapan has failed as well, again, like YB Kelvin mentioned just now, Pakatan Harapan managed to hold government for only 22 months, and it is not easy for you to fix a system that has been corrupted, that has been bad for so long, and for you to be given the chance to only rule or to govern for only 22 months. It's tough for you to fix what is there. But I believe that if given the chance, many things could be changed, and many things can be done for us to fix what has been broken for so long. But again, I think what's very important for the people in general to understand is that politicians are, at the end of the day, they supply to the demands of the people. We will respond to what the people call for. You can see, for example, when the people are starting to call for more young people, more new, fresh faces to be rolled into politics. You can see in Johor State election where many parties start to fill in younger, fresher people, to the front line, because they can hear what the people are calling for, and they know that this is what the people want right now. In the same way as how people are calling for example, right now anti-party hopping law. People are calling for the term limit of a prime minister. The other day, people are calling for example, for the parliament to be reopened, for the Undi 18 generation to be allowed to vote. And when the rally call for the people are big and loud, politicians have no choice but to respond to it. Because at the end of the day, we, again, like I mentioned, we have to supply to the demand of the people. And I think this is something that is very important for the people to know, that you can be involved in the democratic process of the country in many ways. Of course, voting is one of it, but also right now, again, I think it's important for us to also understand that social media is a very, very powerful tool. We are in a world where social media can influence many things. It's important for us to know how to use social media wisely, to influence the people. You can either use it to ignite awareness and passion for people to participate in democratic process, but the other side could also use it to spread their narratives. For example, we look at the recent election in Philippines, if I'm allowed to just look at what happened in our neighboring countries as well, so that we can reflect and see what will happen in our country as well. You look at the election in Philippines, where the people are calling it the TikTok election, because the younger people flood TikTok. These are the generation that has never experienced, the Marcos generation, right? They have not, they do not understand, or they do not know what really happened at that point of time. But then with the power of social media, they flooded TikTok, and they, painted Marcos family as the heroes of the country. They said that that was the time where economic was really blooming in Philippines. They were saying that that was the time where Philippines was very respected by all the other countries across the world, and the Marcos family are the ones who steer Philippines to that particular great direction. And that is the reason why Philippines should give Bongbong Marcos a chance to redeem the image of his family. And it worked, right? TikTok was flooded with people calling for it, and over 80% of people went out to vote in Philippines, and majority of them voted for Bongbong Marcos. And I think a lot of us in other countries, we did not expect that to happen. But when you look at what happened in Philippines, it made you think, right? If something like that could happen in our neighboring country, it could happen in Malaysia as well. If we do not take the initiative to go onto social media, to go on the ground, to spread awareness to the people, especially the younger generations, right? To spread what happened with 1MDB, to let them know why is transparency very important, what is happening with Datuk Sri Najib's case, the 1MDB case, the SRC case, what is happening to the court cluster. Then the other side will then take over that narrative on social media, and the younger generations can be influenced by it very easily, because that is the news that is being fed to them. And so as Malaysians, and especially as politicians, I think we have the duty to, people might feel that, oh, social media is just a game for for the young people to have fun, but we also have the civic duty to penetrate into those platforms, especially the platforms where the younger generations are using, and spread this awareness so that they understand that if you do not go out to vote, if you do not practice your democratic rights, then these things can happen again in our country. Then we are going to allow another chance for the kleptocrats to then rule back the country. And again, like Prof. James, I think, wonderfully said just now, we're going to experience a time travel where we'll just go back to how Malaysia was many, many decades ago. And that is not something that we want. Now, why then Malaysians, answering the question, why then Malaysians who are living abroad should also be involved in the democratic process, right? Because I believe, although you are living abroad, you have family members who are living in Malaysia, family members who have to experience whatever decisions that are being made by the politicians who are ruling or who are governing the country at this point of time. They are the people who had to bear the cost of living when when our economic system went very bad. They are the people who had to endure with the very poor access to education that we have right now, poor quality access to education. They are the people who had to bear with the institutional problems that we have in terms of they have to bear with all these things that are going on right now in Malaysia. And I think it's important for us, for each and every one of us who have the right now, the right to vote, to also make it our responsibility for us to go out and allow allow the people, good people in politics to take over the mantle of leadership in Malaysia, so that we do not have repeated, we do not see a repeat of what happened during Datuk Sri Najib's government. I think that is very important.
Amira. Good to see that the young politicians still carry a lot of hope with you all. Hopefully it actually penetrates, and particularly now that voting registration, I think, is automatic, and the voting age has already been reduced to 18, I believe. So you'll have a lot more young people eligible to vote, and hopefully they can make a difference. Now, moving on, I believe Datuk Ambiga is online. She's with us currently. Apparently, there was some technical issues. Our apologies, Ambiga. I hear there were some technical issues and you couldn't get on, but we're glad that you're now here with us. Now, Ambiga is someone who I don't think needs any introduction. We all know what her contributions and achievements are. She was the inspiration to turn the Bersih name into a global brand. In fact, it was thanks to her and her appeal to overseas Malaysians back in the day that we decided to actually form BMP, or Bersihkan Malaysia Perth, here in Perth. And we are very appreciative of the fact that you are joining us here today. So over to you, Ambiga. Please tell us what your views.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Very nice to see you. And I'm sorry I missed the first speaker, and I think I managed to catch Amira. Thank you all for being here. Let me get straight to the point here. Why do I feel that you must go out and vote? Everyone who can vote must go out and vote. To be honest, I was also feeling the same inertia everybody was feeling. A lack of hope and, just fed up, right? After COVID, after we are now into our third prime minister since GE15. I think people were just totally and utterly fed up. But then I started seeing signs of attacks on our institutions. And I'll only talk about the judiciary here, but I think you will all be aware that because of by virtue of a blog by RPK, who I think you all know very, very well, and many of us actually helped when he was in need, as I recall. He came out with a blog post making allegations, saying that there's a report against a sitting judge. And that judge, of course, is the one who heard and disposed of the Najib Razak suit, the SR suit. So the minute that happened, then very shortly thereafter, the MACC jumps out, publicly announces, yes, a report has been made against Justice Nazlan and it is under investigation. Now, if you didn't smell something funny there, then I think we're not Malaysians, okay? We're so used to rubbish like this going on. And clearly, and then of course, after that, there was a lot of hooing and hawing and so on. And everyone was saying, look, MACC has the right to investigate anyone. No one is above the law. Now, we don't deny that. Of course, no one is above the law, and I think the judges would be the first to say that. But look at the context. Look at how this was done. First of all, RPK gets this information from whom? Question mark. He pronounces it in the open from a very safe distance where nobody can touch him. And then the MACC responds. So it was almost like a setup. I mean, to me, it looks plainly obvious. And the whole point is, of course, to try and undermine the judge who found Najib guilty at first instance. Now, there is no, what is wrong with what MACC did? They shouldn't have made that announcement. Knowing that the judiciary is such an important institution, his duty was to have immediately informed the Chief Justice, and then they can carry out their investigations, but discreetly. And only after they come to a conclusion on it and they decide to take action, can they actually disclose anything. Even then, it has to wait until the AG looks at the evidence and sees if that's the case. What was the need to jump in and say he's under investigation? Because the minute you do that to a judge, you undermine him, you undermine the institution. So then, of course, you would have also have read, I mean, I said I'd only restrict to the judiciary, but perhaps administration of justice as well. The most recent news yesterday that the Serba Dynamic directors or rather office holders who were charged and were going to face prosecution, the AG decided to compound their offences. And he uses the reason as public interest. Now, that is the biggest load of nonsense, because that is not, it is not in the public interest to let crooks get away with what they did, particularly in this case, because it's about investor confidence. The whole point about a strong Securities Commission is that we have laws, we have the means to ensure that the markets have integrity, the capital markets have integrity. That's the whole point. So when the AG used public interest, I mean, if it wasn't so outrageous, it's hysterically funny for a lawyer to actually come out and say that, when actually the greater public good is served by having a well-regulated, honest capital market, because we have to promote investor confidence. So those are the two most recent things. So when this thing about the judge happened, I realized UMNO hasn't changed, BN hasn't changed, or maybe they have changed. They've actually got worse, because honestly, what they are doing to the institutions, and because they're very unhappy about being held accountable, you see, you cannot hold any UMNO leader accountable. So they're very unhappy about all of that. So they're going to do anything and everything that they can to ensure that they're not held accountable. And the tragedy is some institutions are helping them. That's the tragedy. So when you look at that, when I saw that, I thought, hold on a minute. All those people who are on the fence about voting, on the fence about getting involved in the next elections, better change their minds super quick. Because honestly, if UMNO comes back, you will get more of this. More and more and more of this. Zero accountability for all the raping and looting that is going on in the in the corporate world. So I thought, look, I actually did. I mean, I tweeted it as well. I actually thought, well, I suppose if UMNO comes back, we have some hope, perhaps in people like Sharil Hamdan and Khairi, and maybe things can get better. But the minute I saw this, and I realized nobody in UMNO was speaking up, not even this progressive wing of UMNO, I decided, forget it. They will never change. And if they come back this time, they will ensure that they never leave again. And so for that reason, I believe that it is imperative that we all jump in there. And, overseas Malaysians, you've been the greatest supporters of Malaysians at home. And it's your country as much as it's anyone else's. And of course, you have You invested yourselves in Malaysia. So it's wonderful that you all are taking these steps, and I hope you will be with us, because we don't have much time. We have less than a year, I think, if you're looking at May. We don't have much time. And I can tell you, between now and the next elections, there'll be much more looting going on. And whilst in the past, they may have been more subtle about how they're doing it, now they don't have time. It is blatant, and they're going to carry on being blatant. So how can we allow people like this to hold the reins of power again? And I think we really need to get that message through. When I say to people, you have to vote, they say, well, yeah, but who to vote for? Well, you have to vote for the opposition, for anyone but BN and that lot, because they can never be changed. And I think, and I'll wrap up with this. Yeah, I mean, opposition is a mess, and I really wish to God they would get their act together, and I'm hoping they will. But really, the mess they're in now is pretty unforgivable as well. I don't think they realize how cheesed off the Malaysians are, because they got a gift. And Amira, here I will have to disagree with you a little bit on this point, that they only had 2 years. Well, honestly, they could have done a lot more in 2 years. I know, because we were pushing the reform, pushing PH to get the Sedition Act repealed, by the way, which doesn't take very long. Get the death penalty repealed, also doesn't take very long. But the people who were opposing it were people within the opposition itself. Surprise, surprise. And we did this IRC report. Why didn't they disclose it? That's a PH decision. And you see, all these things, reform slowed down. And I told them, if you don't get these things done in the first year, it won't get done. When a new government comes in, they got to get step into the shoes very quickly and get these changes done. So I do not excuse PH at all. I also think they are hugely responsible for the Sheraton Move. If they had been strong, it wouldn't have happened. I'm not saying that the people who committed those awful acts upon the Malaysian people are right. No doubt, they're the pengkhianat. But PH was not strong. And let me tell you, they're even weaker now. And that is what frightens me, Amira, quite frankly. But however frightened we are, we still have to vote for them. And I think grudgingly perhaps, but we have no choice. And I think the next 1 year, we need to educate all those who have now been automatically registered as voters. We need to educate them. We don't even know. It's a huge number, it's a huge millions. And they don't even know some of them don't even know they are registered. So I think that's where our work lies in the next 1 year. Thank you very much.
Just following on from what you said about having to vote for the opposition, I suppose one of the concerns that people have actually expressed is, even if you were to just go for any opposition candidate, can they form coalition government and can they operate? How do you actually address those kind of concerns and fears?
Well, I mean, look, we can't lie to anyone. They've seen it for themselves. They have pulled together before. They did. They pulled together after 2014. So I am convinced, and I know that for the purposes of carrying out the agenda, they will have no choice but to work together. They have to find the formula. I mean, I think that the youth, the MUDA gives us a lot of hope. Look at what the youngsters are prepared to do. If the youngsters are prepared to fight so hard as they're doing and they're being blocked everywhere, who are we? We should be giving them our full support. So I think, and I know what you mean, because when they fight with each other, it's about the stupidest things. But I'm afraid we're going to have to believe that there are enough good people there. And I talk about people like Amira and all the MUDA gang, and there are good people there, that they will make it work because they have no choice. So I'm not making any promises about the opposition. Sorry, that one I've stopped doing. Okay, we're just going to have to bank on the fact that they will have enough sense to do it if they win enough seats. Yeah.
Okay. Amira, would you like to comment on that as well?
Hi, Amira. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay, ma'am. Well, yeah, I think for me personally, I think it's again, I feel that at the end of the day, this is the nation that we are going to live in, right? I'm going to have a family here, and many more generations will be here as well. And it is my responsibility, as much as anyone's responsibility who is a Malaysian, to fight for what we think is right in this country. And I always believe that regardless of whatever shambles or whatever things that we are seeing right now in politics, I feel that the true hope of Malaysia will always rest within all of Malaysians. And as long as there are Malaysians who are, like the people here in this forum, who want to talk about these issues, who want to have this discussion on how can we make this country better, there will always be hope into making this country better. And again, in what Madam Ambiga mentioned just now as well, obviously along the way, the opposition, including us from MUDA, we will make mistakes, right? We are humans, and to is human. But it is very important for the people to hold us accountable to the mistakes the mistakes that we will probably make in the future. And as a young politician, I think it's very important also for us to take the accountability to our mistakes that we have made and learn how to then be better for the people who have given the mandate to us. And that is definitely something in MUDA that we are not scared of doing. If we have done something that is wrong, we own up to it, and have to again give our best to Malaysia, as that is what we are being entrusted to do.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, we've heard MUDA's point of view. Kelvin, how about presenting DAPSY's point of view?
I think I in principle, of course, agree with things that we said, and I think that we as the opposition, we have so much that we need to back up and everything. But I think one of the good things, as I said, being in government even for 2 years, it gives us the experience as well as a know-how of the mammoth task that is in front of us. While, as I said, I share the sentiments of Datuk Ambiga in terms of the reforms that we want to make. Again, I'm not making excuses, but the reality is there were a lot of resistance, especially even within our own coalition at that period of time. I was one of the big proponents to push for why are we not, for example, death penalty, something that I believe in very strongly. But again, this is a skill, I guess, something that we had to learn of working with a coalition rather than just a single party kind of a government. So once we had a coalition at that time with, of course, our previous member Bersatu, there were a lot of clashes in ideologies moving forward. So that is why there were a lot of issues that were stuck to a certain extent. Actually, the consensus, I mean, I can share with you the consensus when it comes to the death penalty at that time, because I was directly involved with Datuk Lee Wee Kiong, was that we will follow what was said in the manifesto instead. What the manifesto said wasn't abolishment, but rather removing the mandatory provision to give discretion to the judge, and then and especially removing it from the Dangerous Drugs Act, which is something that has to go. I mean, it has to go right now. Again, that was supposed to be done actually in 2020, along with decriminalization of attempted suicide, which is something another thing close to my heart, which was supposed to be in 2020. Again, the mistake that PH had, and I have openly admitted this, is we thought we had 5 years and we got complacent. We thought that we could, again, I'm not making excuses, but we thought that in the first 2 years, let's try to avoid some time bombs. Let's try to push first our economic policies, some issues to set a foundation to hopefully in a few 4-5 years, you will see some fruits. Then once the people are happy with bread and butter issues, fundamental issues, then we can kind of slip in some of these reforms that may be controversial Sedition Act. I can openly say Bersatu was very against us abolishing Sedition Act, so on and so forth, even from certain factions within a party that we're still partner with. I won't mention names. So again, it is we experience being government, we experience governing together, and for me, bitter and sweet. This is something that we have learned, and I think moving forward, if given opportunity again, I think this is something a very valuable experience that we can carry. And with MUDA on board, and with of course young people on board, I'm optimistic in terms of the things that we want to push. And I think the young people have shown more heart in terms of pushing reform agendas forward. I see, as Datuk Ambiga mentioned just now, why I remain optimistic is because I have seen with my own eyes enough good people, at least within our side. Of course, there are hantus within our side, so as well, but enough good people that can push through for a better Malaysia. And I think we need to persevere rather than see hope, then only persevere, but persevere until we see hope. So yeah.
Shall I respond or?
Sorry? Yes, please.
Or does James want to say something? No.
James, any viewpoint?
The only viewpoint I have is that I think two things are very important. One is I think we should stop looking back. I think one of the problems we have is that we keep looking back at 22 months and say what could have done, what could not have done. I think for the people who want to see real reforms in Malaysia, we have to put our energy together towards GE15. I think the reality on the ground is a reminder to everyone that on the ground, at least in Peninsular Malaysia, whether you like it or not, Barisan Nasional and its linchpin UMNO do have the momentum. They're feeling super confident. I've never seen that level of confidence for a very long time. I think, having said that, it's not a question of looking back, but I think some key lessons will have to be learned and to be brought forward. I think there's two things to be learned from the 22 months. We shouldn't dwell on it, but the two important points that we should keep at the back of my mind as we move forward is that the role of the Prime Minister is very, very important. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter who is pushing for what. If your roadblock is street banana, I think it's very, very difficult. I think we should not make a mistake of, how should I put this in a delicate term? We should not put a mistake of putting another dinosaur in the #1 position. I think that was a huge, I wouldn't say it's a mistake because, things happen. There's really no way to go back and change it. But I'm saying that, this is something that we can avoid next round. The second key lessons to be learned is that it doesn't matter what people say about things cannot be done, push here, push there. At the end of the day, very early on, if the opposition get a chance to rule again, I would argue that the most important thing is to get a grip of the civil service. In my how should I say it, in my studies on what happened in 22 months, right? I can tell you the civil service is start all and end all of any reform, service delivery, everything. You just have to go through them. There is no way you can run a parallel system there. If you don't get these two right, getting the right leader to be appointed at the very top, and you don't get a grip of the civil service, I think it doesn't matter. Even if you have a strong team, you are coordinated, things are not going to happen at the pace that you want to happen. So having said that, I think it's very important that we move forward, stop dwelling on the past. I don't think our friend who's 97 years old is making a comeback. So we have a real chance to go for somebody new. My only gripe is that I would prefer not the present leader of PKR to be the Prime Minister candidate. It's a position I've taken openly. The reason is because, again, it's based on my own individual study, my own personal viewpoint. The rural Malays are not ready to make that drastic switch. So that is only my 2 cents. But again, my hope is that Malaysians will put all their energy towards GE15. I think there is an opportunity there. And as I said earlier in my earlier presentation, if you're not going to put in your energy there, then if things happen, you shouldn't complain too much. Thank you.
Okay. Shall I respond now?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So I have to disagree, James, that you don't look at the past, because my biggest regret with the opposition is that there was never any self-examination about what happened. Why did it collapse? Yeah. You know why? Because they didn't think it was their fault. They're so arrogant They thought nothing they did could have caused this. It was pengkhianat. So as long as they found someone else to blame, they didn't have to look at themselves. And I told them this so many times. And I'll tell you one more thing about the opposition. And that's why I know you're talking about the past. I'm saying it so that it never happens again. They were so arrogant when they were in power, okay? Civil society moved heaven and earth to help them come into power. And you know, after a while, they didn't even bother with civil society. So I'm sorry. I'm not forgiving. I'm sorry, we're here to be blunt. You know why? We don't have the luxury of being nice. We don't have the luxury of time. So as far as I'm concerned, if you cannot do self-examination, you cannot be in power. Because power is about constant self-examination, okay? And it also means you can't take criticism. And fine, easy to blame the 97-year-old man. Yes, I mean, he's to blame for a lot of things. But I blame all the others too. What were they doing sitting in the room? I don't buy this thing about one man decides everything, you know, and I know it's not true as well. There were many within the parties who opposed all of these. IPCMC, we were a whisker away, okay? A whisker away from solidifying it. Some nonsense people inside, I won't mention which party, making a huge fuss about it, and it's gone, and it'll never come back. So if I'm angry, please forgive me, because honestly, you screwed up. Opposition did. So I would like self-examination. I'm sorry. And you are at the end of the day, and I'm glad to hear Kelvin saying the things that he is, because I know he cares. He knows because he worked on the death penalty, and I know exactly who opposed it inside government, and it wasn't the old man, by the way. All right. So he didn't oppose a lot of things. He wasn't interested. He was only interested in investments, from what I understand. So here, so this is what I say. But I do think you have to look at the 22 months and find out where you went wrong. It's important. And I also think that at the end of the day, James is absolutely right. The new blood is what is going to give us hope. So if you're going to rehash the same top leaders, I mean, good for DAP. They've at least had a change. It's nice to see. But then you're hearing the same rhetoric over and over again from everyone else. It's very tiring, actually. So I suspect, let me tell you, much as we all may say you must come out and vote, that a lot of people will not, because they don't see any hope in the opposition either. So my own view is get on with it, get a new agenda going, get some new leaders, and push forward. And I tell you, you can take the sweep. I think you can sweep it this time around as well, because a lot of people are fed up about what's going on. That's all.
Can I have a 30-second reply?
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you. So I think, of course, Ambiga, you're working on certain issues, but based on my interview with a lot of people, the impression I got was that the Prime Minister's office control a lot of the final part of the decision-making process. If Mahathir really didn't want some, I agree with you, the minor things he was not interested in, but some of the major things that if he really disagreed with it, he could not get through. That's the point I'm trying to make. On the major fundamental stuff, when I interviewed some of the ex-ministers, they just told me that the old man just refused to listen.
Of course, the ex-ministers will say that because they don't want to admit that they didn't fight hard enough. I know, because I know what was going on inside, James. You need to speak to Tommy Thomas and he'll tell you a thing or two about the people really opposing it.
No, I think the reality is different ministers, again, they want to rewrite their own history or whatever, but they also have different perception of what's going on. So it is true that, you know, we all have different versions, but the reality is that the truth of the matter is that a lot of the major reforms were not done. I mean, that's the point I'm trying to make. So the point I'm trying to make is that if we delve too much on the past, we can't move forward. And I'm saying that we should learn the key lessons, as I mentioned, but put our energies together for the next GE.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, don't mind me coming in. I would like to affirm actually both arguments. The fact of the matter, actually, the systemic issue that we need to address is actually the power of the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister's office has been given, I mean, patronage politics starts from there. Too much power in the Prime Minister. So of course, certain issues, at least I'm aware of, at least that was been told to me. Yes, the Prime Minister did block such reforms, but certain reforms, as Dr. Ambiga is absolutely correct, Dr. Mahathir never went against the death penalty. The fact of the matter, he was one of the first to actually bring up that issue, but the objections came from ministers within the same party. So again, it's no one is wrong. Neither, I mean, both are right to a certain extent, the context. But I think the systemic issue we addressed, and it was shared right at the beginning. I think one of the reforms we have to do is the Prime Minister's office.
Yeah.
We started that. We removed the Finance Minister from his purview. But then there's still so much patronage politics. There's still too much power in the Prime Minister. I think the next for me, in my view, if we're given a chance, we need to empower Parliament. We need to transfer a lot of the Prime Minister's powers to the Parliament. And for me, that has to be the fundamental and the emphasis if we want to address a lot of the systemic rot that we have. And to affirm another point that was made by Prof. James just now, in my view, and I shared this with my leadership, and I think a lot of my leadership agree, one of the mistakes that we made as PH, call it arrogance, call it inexperience, we never really won the civil service over. And because we did not, and it's partially our fault, because we never give a good vision, we never give them, to a certain extent, stability, we never give them a long-term kind of a vision of what we want to achieve. So a lot of things were done ad hoc. We want this ad hoc, but there was no long-term. Of course, I'm not making excuses. A lot of them have been used to the old systemic under Barisan Nasional. They were used to that system. They were probably supporters of that system. So of course, it takes time to change. But one of the things that if we were to do better, we need to get them on board. We shouldn't be seeing them as enemies. We shouldn't be. That is why actually I'm very against the whole narrative of deep state. No, it's true. It happens. It happens. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but bringing it up and making an enemy of them does not help our cause. As I said, these are lessons that we need to learn. And I fully agree with Dr. Ambiga. While we shouldn't look at the past and dwell and linger in it, but we need to find out where we went wrong. And I said, as much as I hate the pengkhianats, we need to ask the question again, why was that happening? And some of the flaws happened with us. And I cannot speak for other parties, but in DAP, we had an internal discussion and we acknowledged certain issues. Main leaders acknowledged their roles in the fall of the government. And because of that, we went through, of course, the leadership change, we went through a different narrative, and we acknowledged even our flaws. So again, of course, this is where we move forward. As I said, I cannot speak for other parties. I'm sure they're going through the same process and journey as well. But we need now, as I said, to put all our strength in GE15. As I said, it's a choice between two. And as imperfect as we are, together with MUDA, we still represent the most inclusive, most needs-based, most consensus-building coalition. So again, in politics, it's making an ideal choice in an unideal situation. And that's the reality that we have to do. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Kelvin. And speaking of moving on, the questions have been coming in fairly thick and fast, both online and from the attendees here. We've got one here for you, Kelvin, since you're the last speaker. You mentioned ideology. What is the thinking behind big tent and small tent? Is it ideological alignment or simply transactional?
Okay. Again, I have to put a caveat. I was not privy of the Presidential Council discussion on that. I was only recently put in the Presidential Council as the DAPSY chief. So when I went in, I wasn't privy to the previous arrangement. But for my understanding, for my leaders, of course, my Secretary General, the Port Dickson Declaration, when they talk about Big Ten, it only means and only covers the opposition parties. So the big question of is Bersatu and PAS and all this, basically Perikatan Nasional, are they part of the Big Tent? So based on that declaration, partisan declaration, they are not. So this Big Tent only involves opposition parties. So basically Pakatan Harapan, MUDA, Warisan, and Pejuang, and of course the other Sabah Sarawak parties. So there are differences in opinions within our coalition. As you can see in newspapers, we've seen different people advocating different direction. But actually, Okay, I'm speaking. This is my personal opinion. And this is nothing to represent the party that I represent. But for example, if we talk about Bersatu, Bersatu has clearly said that pass is part of the package if we want to work in Bersatu. So I myself has very huge, irreconcilable ideological differences with working with pass. And I'm not talking about the Nik Aziz time. I'm talking about Hadi Awang's time and the direction that pass is heading towards. So just for the sake of winning an election, I cannot, in good conscience, be working with pass. And the fact is, Bersatu even people say, oh, Bersatu is a cleaner alternative to UMNO. But it was under Muhyiddin's administration that we see Musa Aman was set free. It was under Muhyiddin's administration where so many corruption cases were just taken. He is the king of the scheme of things, offering GLC's positions and so on and so forth. So how can we then make a choice? And the big question if we work with Bersatu for the sake of election expediency, who knows, in some miracle we win the election, what makes it think that Bersatu may not jump back to UMNO? Because they say, oh, I cannot work with DAP because they are maybe too dominant, so on and so forth. So again, if we get cheated once, get betrayed once, shame on them. Betrayed twice, shame on us. So these are considerations that we have to take. Again, I'm saying this is my personal view, but these are considerations that has been discussed within our ranks and to make these decisions. Yeah. I hope that answers the question.
Well, I suppose the question was posed by an online viewer, so if they have a follow-up question, then they'll know. There's a question here for MUDA, so I suppose this one will be featured by you, Amira. Think MUDA could be the driving force behind the next election, and if so, how?
Well, I don't think I'm too proud to say that, MUDA should be the sole driving force of the next election. I think I agree with many people that the younger people in general would be deciding the future of the next general election, because we have about 7.8 million new young voters coming into the next GE. And it is very important for us to look at the recent Johor election to see the inclination of the younger voters, and then chart the way to GE and what should we do, especially us in Pakatan Harapan and MUDA, to see how can we then influence the younger generation to vote for us and not for Barisan Nasional. I think what we have done so far in MUDA is that the existence of MUDA itself has pushed for many more conservative parties to then bring in more young people, bring in more fresh faces into politics. And I think that is a very good thing. But at the end of the day, it is also important for us to then compare between the young people in politics and the people who bring the young agenda in politics. Because at the end of the day, you also have a lot of the younger people who are stuck with the old agenda of Barisan Nasional, who are still stuck with the own institutional ideals of Barisan Nasional, rather than the reforms that we need for the next generation. Whether or not we will be the driving force of the next election, I think it very much depends on what we are going to do in the next couple of months leading to the next general election. Whether we are able to inspire more and more young people to go out to vote, because I think it's very important, again, to not blame the voters and the voters only, to say that it is your fault that that Pakatan Harapan MUDA didn't win in Johor State election, right? We should never, I think, blame the voters if they don't want to go out to vote, because at the end of the day, it is also our duty to inspire them to vote. And that is why I think it is very important for all of us to not shoot ourselves dead before the election even starts, right? I don't think we should go out, go out and say that there's no chance for Pakatan Harapan and MUDA to win the next election. I think it's a very irresponsible statement to be made. I think as politicians, we have the responsibility to tell our supporters that we are here to win the election, that we are here to bring change, and to inspire them to go out to vote for us. And that is what MUDA is focusing to do.
Role. A lot of them are actually unaware of the fact they're on the electoral roll. So is there an awareness campaign to let them know they can vote, take steps to actually determine where you're meant to vote, that your name is actually on the roll, and then to reach out to them as to who to vote for? What are the parties actually doing towards that end? Amira?
Yeah, well, sorry, my line is a bit stuck just now. Well, right now what we are doing is we are starting on our tour. We are going from universities tour as well as a general tour of Syed Saddiq as the president of MUDA, to engage with the younger generations, to engage with the younger voters, to let them know that they are now allowed to vote, that they have the responsibility to vote. But I believe that it is not enough for you to just tell them that they can vote. I think it's also our responsibility to give them, or to educate them on the voting process and what are the ideals that we need to strive for a better Malaysia in the future. And so what we are doing right now, we are going to launch our Sekolah Politik very soon. And this, we will work very closely with organizations who have done Sekolah, all this political education awareness before. And we are going to engage with more young voters, not just those who are 18 and 20 to 21 years old. We are hoping to engage with the voters, with the future voters who are younger, 16 years old, 17 years old, 18 years old, so that from now they already understand their duty, their civic responsibility as Malaysians, and for them to go to vote. The recent Johor State election, I think what's very interesting in my campaign as well is that, sadly, not many young people got to vote in Johor. But I think what's very inspiring in my campaign itself, I have many campaigners who are below the age of 21. I have many campaigners who are at the age of 17 years old, 16 years old, but they do have the permission of their parents to help me campaign. And I think this signifies a good, signify something good in the future of Malaysia. But now we just need to expand that more and more, especially in the rural area. And I think this is also why it's important for us to have to create this awareness via social media as well, because many of them are on many social media platforms, and we need to engage with them, in a way that is closest to them, which is via social media for the younger generations.
This one is from a member who is present here. There has been suggestions that candidates should be voted based on their track record and integrity, not on party lines. How will this go down with voters, and how should it be implemented? Anybody? Any views?
James should take it.
Yeah, James, quite academic, so.
I think this question is related to the recent a lot of media coverage about this group called Gerak Independent. So I think my personal view is that in the Malaysian system, it is still party politics that would decide the outcome of governments. So it's really up to the individual parties to select the right type of candidates. I think for groups like Gerak Independent, in terms of people, I would like to see those are good people who should be sent in because they're not tied to parties, so they can raise certain issues in parliament. But when it comes to the formation of government, it's really a numbers game. And at the end of the day, in the present Malaysian system, the number games, essentially you're talking about coalition of political parties. So it's a question of parties making sure that they select the right candidates. The other thing I just wanted to bring up in terms of GE15 is I think we need to really, especially among non-Malay communities, we really need to sort of reflect on what is happening on the Malay ground, because it's quite interesting for me as somebody who has looked at Malaysian politics for many years now, that the Malay ground, is shifting back to UMNO, and on the surface, it seems totally illogical that the most popular politician in Malaysia is somebody who's been convicted, but he goes around with a police outrider. He's still very popular, and just starting from this year, he started to interact with the non-Malay community, and he finds that he's also very popular in the non-Malay community. So it is quite interesting that something is happening in the political culture, especially among the Malay community, where certain things are no longer important. Well, it's widely understood that in Malaysian system that if you are elected politicians, you will be involved in some sort of crony business or that sort of thing. But what we're talking about is really grand larceny. We're talking about 4 billion siphoned off, all that sort of thing. But yet, this sort of thing under, I would say, up to the Mahathir era, anybody who stole that kind of money, the system will correct itself. But somehow something has happened to the Malay political culture that this thing is no longer, how should I say, is no longer a factor. And I think I take Amira's point that, you can see the same thing happening with the recent Filipino elections. And I also sort of in agreement with her that social media will play outsized role, especially with the new voter, the so-called 18 to 20-year-old voters. If you look at the recent studies coming out of the Philippines, Marcos, Bongbong Marcos' victory was basically due to young people. And, what is really interesting is that all of them say that in terms of how to vote, they get their information from social media. In addition to TikTok, the second biggest item that said they get the information was Facebook. But when you drill one level below, what is even more shocking is that they get the information from influencers. In other words, they bypass all the normal, traditional news sources. In fact, they purposely reject traditional news sources. They want to see somebody jumping up and down, in the 30-second video telling them how to vote. So I'm not sure that is happening in Malaysia yet, but I suspect those who are promoting either side, they're looking at this carefully, and I will not be surprised that some of these key people in the Philippines, influencers, those who ran this operation in the Philippines, are currently being contacted by their Malaysian counterparts to help the Malaysian counterparts to prepare for GE15. This is something, it is not a good thing for Malaysia, but as I said earlier, this comes back to the point, something is happening in Malay political culture. I myself is trying to understand it, and I just don't understand how is it possible that, that this phenomenon happening, in younger Malay politics.
Okay, thank you very much, James. We've got a question. Apparently, we are running out of time. Can I invite last-minute comments, final comments from the candidates? We'll start with you, James, move on to Datuk Ambiga. And
everything I have to say was in my presentation at the start of this seminar. I gave the reasons why GE15 is important, and I gave a list of the things I would like to see reform. So basically, my summary is that, if people think that nothing will happen, then nothing will happen. If they want something to happen, they have to get involved. There is no other way. This is the Malaysian system. That's the bottom line.
Thank you, Professor James. Dr. Ambiga?
Yes, very quickly. I think, James, if I can offer a reason why we have this political culture where Najib can get away with so much. Actually, two reasons. Number one, he has managed to reinvent himself using social media, and people never took it seriously. Everyone was just, whatever. But slowly, surely, he has built himself a new image, and it's working. And number two, it's the feudalism in our society, actually. When you ask many people, they'll say, yeah, all politicians take money, but at least he gave me a little bit of it. Do you know what I mean? So there's that kind of feudal way of thinking, which is still there. And I think they have managed to push the line that there was no stability when Pakatan Harapan was there. You know what I mean? And I think that is one of the things that they're using. But what I would say is that when I went to Johor, I went on the ground, and I was actually a bit saddened that race plays a huge role still everywhere. I went down basically to speak to the Indian community, okay? And of course also the mixed community, but I was also, helping with the Indian community to explain things and all that. So it's so racial still, and it's something you have to live with. But I think Amira reached across all those lines, and that's why I say the youth can actually smash some of these old way of doing things, and smash some of these boogeymen, as it were. And what I would like to ask the opposition, Kelvin and Amira here, very embarrassing question, but have you all actually decided who the future Prime Minister is going to be? I mean, your Prime Minister candidate, because that to me is pretty key as well. So, I mean, I'm assuming you don't really have an answer, or you have an answer and you're not sure. Well, I leave it to you. But I think we also need a manifesto, which hopefully is a joint manifesto, which you can already start promoting. And make it short and sweet this time, please, because something like the birthday demands, 8 demands, something everybody can repeat, So that's what I would say. But I think really I'm looking for new faces, new blood, a new agenda, a new vision for Malaysia. And I think with people like Kelvin and Amira, actually, I really think you can do it. But you guys need to get the chance. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. So that might be a good cue then to move on to Kelvin.
Let me get this, sorry. No, I fully agree what Datuk Ambiga mentioned just now about the feudal mentality and why Najib is gaining relevance in our society today. And that itself is my worry and my hope, and especially my challenge to young people, that says young people are actually the moral barometer of the society. Once we allow a criminal, kleptocrat to go around and be revered as a hero, there's something wrong with our society. And we young people, and historically around the world, when there is a moral decay, young people are the generator that steps up. So that is where is our challenge, to ignite, to inspire, and to capture the hearts of young people to rise up. That is actually a challenge itself, because a lot of young people are in a place of comfort. And in a place of comfort, we have not reached that tipping point to actually push through. But with that said, I've seen hope, I've seen enough good people, and I've seen perseverance to push through. To answer some of the questions that Ambiga said, the first question, of course, I have my candidate in my heart, but the coalition will have to announce it. Whether it is consistent with what I believe in my heart, that one is yet to see. But never mind, I will get to that. But I think in terms of preparation for manifesto and policies moving forward, at least on a PH level, we have already had discussion. Committees have been formed in terms of to discuss what is our manifesto. As I said, we have learned to a certain extent, of course not 100% from the 22 months when we were in government. We have learned how to structure our policies better, more feasible, more understandable, not too over the edge, that it cannot be done. So I think, as I said, there is a silver lining to all that's been done. I myself am involved with some of the policies, especially on health and others. So I think that is a way moving forward. My last encouragement is to say is that we are a work in progress. As I said, the young people are rising up, but the older generations is still important. As I said, our country is multiple generations. As I said, we need to work together. There's still some conservative segments in our society that cannot accept us young people. That is where we need to work as generations and bridge that gap. And let us persevere to see hope, rather than just only see hope, then we think we want to do something. So with that, thank you so much. And I really got to go. God bless you all. Bye.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to make a move as well. Sorry, Amira. I have to have another appointment. Yeah. Thanks.
So thanks very much, Amika, for taking time off to spend with us. And if you ever come down to Perth, yes, you got the email of the group to get in touch and we'll love to host you. That goes for you too, Kelvin. Okay, and finally, Amira, lucky
Thank
last.
you so much. Well, I mean, although Madam Amiga has to leave, I just answered that question. Again, I have a Prime Minister candidate, but I think more importantly than that, I believe that it's really high time for us to move away from a singular personality in politics. And it is more important for us to tell the people more than just this one person as a Prime Minister candidate. Look at our team. And this is the team cabinet that we're going to present to you if we win the next election. These are the people who will be your ministers. And these people are much better option than what the other side can offer. And I always believe in the strength of a team rather than the strength of just one person.
That's excellent. Thank you. Now I
Thank
will go.
Yes, thanks so much for that, because that actually ends things on a very high note. Thank you all for taking time off to join us here remotely. And if you're ever in Perth, do get in touch. I think, Professor James, you have been to Perth before, I think. So yes, Raymond is here, so if you remember him. And do get in touch. We would love to host you. We might be able to do an in-person presentation just like this. All the best, and hopefully we will keep in touch. Thanks again, and goodbye. Can we have a round of applause for them?
Not able to turn the
What? Show them the.
show them, yeah.
Too few, don't disappoint. We have a lot online. There's opportunity.